Yes, this is Shivareddy. Welcome to the session on Java interview question and answers for the freshers. This session is also helpful for the candidates who are attending the campus interviews. Before go ahead with this session, the assumption is that you already know the Java concepts. Then this tutorial or this session is going to help you to prepare for an interview within very short time. Let us go ahead and start the question and answer session. First question is, what are the Woofs concepts in Java? Woofs stands for Object Oriented Programming Features. Those are class, object, inheritance, polymorphism, abstraction, and encapsulation. Class is a blueprint from which objects are going to be produced. An object is a physical entity which has both properties and behavior. And then what are JVM, JRE and JDK? JVM is a virtual machine or it is a specification where our Java programs are going to execute. JRE stands for Java Runtime Environment. It is going to be provide an environment to execute the programs. That means JRE internally contains JVM. And JDK stands for Java Development Kit. It contains, it is going to provide the development tools such as Java C, Java, and also it internally by default it contains the JRE and JVM. What is bytecode? The one of the strongest feature of the Java is platform independent. So the platform independent behavior exhibit because of Java produces the bytecode. What is meant by bytecode is when you compile a .java file, then it will produce the .class file. That is known as bytecode. The bytecode is the feature of platform independence. Once you compile and you get the bytecode, that bytecode can be run on any operating system where JVM is there or JRE already installed on that machine. Now, the next question is on what is abstraction and encapsulation. See, the abstraction is what abstraction going to say is it is going to give you the high level details, but it hides the internal how it designed or internal details. For example, if you take a class or if you take a bank, in the bank class you have withdrawal and deposit. So everybody can understand that there is a deposit and withdrawal happen, but internally how it goes, nobody knows. That is called an abstraction. In Java, abstraction can be hatched in two ways. One is using the abstract class, it is, and second one is interface. Through the interface, we will get 100% of the abstraction, but through the abstract class, we may have lesser possibility. And encapsulation. Encapsulation is binding the data as a single, binding the binding the properties and behaviors as a single unit is called as an encapsulation. For example, whenever you create a class, always you are going to create a properties with the private access specifier, and you are going to create a methods for that. So all these things you are going to combined as a one unit, that is nothing but the class. So whenever you create a class, by default you are providing the encapsulation. What is a constructor? Constructor is a special type of method which is used to initialize an objects. That means whenever you are creating an object, you want to initialize with the few properties or default values, then you are going to provide the constructor. So constructor, if you don't create any constructor in your class, then by default JVM will create a default constructor. But if you create any constructor in your class, then it is your responsibility to initialize that constructor with the proper values while creation of the object. Now let us see what is the difference between the constructor and the method. So constructor, in order to say you are the constructor, the first property is the method name should be the same as the class name. And second one is it does not have any return type. And in the case of method will have a return type, and also the method name can be anything, but it should have a return type. That is the only difference. And in the case of constructor, while creation of the object itself, automatically constructor is going to be invoked. But in the case of method, you need to create an object for that class, and then by using the object, you can invoke it. Okay, and by default, constructor is going to return a this operator, but in the case of method, you need to explicitly return it. These are the few differences. Now let us see what are the local instance and static variables in Java. Local variables are whatever the variables you are going to define within a block or the method or the constructor is known as local variables. The scope of the variables is going to be a specific block where you have defined. Either it may be a block or it may be a method or it might be a constructor. The instance variables are like it is for instance variables are at the per each object. How many objects you are going to create, those many instance copies will be available. The scope of the instance is going to be within the class. So every time you create an object, there is a new copy is available in the memory. And static are we will call as a class level variables. That means there is a only single copy of the data, single copy of available for how many instances are you are going to create for that class. That means only one copy will be available for the class, and how many objects you are going to create using that class will share the same value. That is called a static variable. And now, what is the difference between declaring a variable or defining a variable? So declaring is nothing but you are just defining which data type it is going to specify. For example, int input equal to input. That means input is it is going to take a value of data type is int. That is what it is going to say. And defining a variable is nothing but you are going to initialize the value. For example, int input equal to 10. That means you are assigning a value of 10 to the input of data type of integer. That is the basic difference between the variable and declaring a variable and defining a variable. Now, what is overloading and what is overriding in Java? Overloading. A class contains different methods with the same name with different parameters or with different return type is no sorry with different data types or different different arguments or number of arguments should be different, then it is known as overloading. It is also known as a static binding or compile time polymorphism. All are synonyms. Overloading happens in a single class should have the multiple methods with the same name. One criteria is you can have a different number of input parameters might be different, or it should have a different number of data types is going to be different. Then it is known as overloading. And overriding happens when you have a easier relationship. That means you should have a superclass and subclass. Then superclass and subclass should have the same method signature. Then what it is going to happen is subclass method is going to be override the superclass method. Then it is known as overriding. So overriding happens only when you are having superclass and subclass relation, and both in the superclass and subclass you should have the same method signature. Okay, and then can we overload a main method? Yes, you can overload how many methods you want, you can overload, that is not a problem. But whenever Java trying to run your program, it always checks for public static void main. Then The Java program is going to recognize that as a main method and it is going to execute. That means you can overload main method. At the same time, you can overload the constructor also, because constructor also you can define as many as with the different parameters. And what are public, private, protected, and default modifiers? So these we will call as a access modifiers. Then by using these access modifiers or specifiers, you can restrict the access of your data from the, that means you can protect your data from the outer side world. For example, the first one is public. When you define any variable or the method with the public, that means anybody can access that method or that variable. When you say private, the methods which are you are going to define in the within the class, within the same class, only they can access the, that means they can access these variable are the methods. Protected. Protected is when you have a is when you have a protected is nothing but you can access when you define any variable or the method as a protected. These protected variables can be accessed through your subclass. That means superclass you can define as a protected. Then those variables will be available in the subclass. And also the scope of the protected is going to be by default the package level you can specify. And default is also a package level. That means default is nothing but you can access through the within the same package. That is. Now let us see what is meant by package in Java. In Java, package is going to bring you the modularity. That means if you want to write a set of functionality related to the particular component or the particular business logic, you can club all those Java classes together. You can put that in a package. So package is going to be bundle the common resources as a single unit, so that it is easy to specify or easy to understand while maintaining or while you are going through the code, or maintenance also very easy. For example, if you see array list, all these things will be coming into the util dot array list things. And in the case of list, you have the AWT is a one package. So what are the components it is related to the AWT to implement all those things will be in the one package. In the similar way, servlet is also having a one particular package for the HTTP request. So like that, it is going to bring you the modularity, and uh, it is going to maintain a modularity by combining all the similar functionality as a single unit. Next one, can we import any packages twice? Yes, you can import any times, but what happens is when JVM loading your classes, first it will check whether the class whatever you are looking for it is already loaded to the memory or not. If it is there, then next time it won't import, or it won't import those packages to your JVM. And next one is, what is interface and the abstract class in Java? The interface is, it is the Java does not support a multiple inheritance. So that is the reason the another concept it comes as a interface. Interface by default, whatever the methods you are defining in the interface are abstract methods. That means there is no implementation, only declaration will be there in the interfaces. And by default, whatever the values it is going to be, the properties, whatever values you are going to define, that is by default, it is going to be public and final. That means the values you cannot change. That is what it is, the interface. And abstract class contains both concrete methods as well as abstract methods. Abstract method is nothing but the method which does not have any definition. That means only declaration will be there. Then the class which is actually extending the abstract class is the responsibility to provide the implementation for that. In the case of interface also, whenever any other class want to implement this interface, then that class is responsible to provide the all the methods implementation in the subclass. In another commonality is in the case of abstract class, if you are thinking that there is a common functionality is available across all the subclasses, then instead of going through the interface, you just put that common functionality in the abstract class so that the same functionality can be applied for all the subclasses. But if you think that the implementation is going to be different across all the subclasses, then it is always better to go with the interface. And next one is what is meant by marker interface. The interface does not have any methods in that interface, or any methods or the properties in that interface is called as a marker interface. For example, serializable is a marker interface. So it does not have any, by default, it does not have any methods or any member functions or the properties in that. That is known as a marker interface. But when JVM executing these marker interfaces, there will be special instructions is given to the JVM so that these interfaces, whenever any class implements these marker interfaces, they will be treated as a separate and the functionality will be applied at the runtime. Now, next question is what is this super and final keywords in Java? Now let us talk about this. This always pointing to the current object. Whenever you are have a requirement to represent the current object, then you can use the this. And super always represent the superclass object. That means let us consider you have a superclass and subclass. Now you want to represent the current class, that means subclass object, then you can say this dot employee ID, for example. If you want to represent the same property in the superclass, then you can say super dot employee ID. That means you are referring to the superclass. Similarly, this dot sub method, that means it is the current object it is invoking, and the super dot method name means it is going to invoke the superclass method. At the same time, this of you can pass some argument to invoke the constructor of the same class. If you want to invoke the constructor of the superclass, then super of you can pass some arguments. It will invoke the superclass constructor. And final is almost similar to the constant in C or C++ language. That means once you assign a value to the final variable, that means that value is going to be constant. That is called as final. So now final can be applied at the three levels. One is at the variable level, method level, class level. If you apply at the variable level, the value cannot be changed. If you apply at the method level, then you cannot override that method. If you apply at the class level, then you cannot inherit. This is the three ways you can implement the final keyword functionality. Next, most important question, can you explain method? This is one of the important question because if you understand main method correctly means you have a lot of command over the most of the concepts. The first one is public static void main. Public is we are specifying because this needs to be accessed outside of the anywhere from the program you need to access, that is in public. Static as main method, it does not create an object. So there is another way Java providing to load your class without creating an object, that is the using static. So whenever you define any method or the variable as a static, before object creation itself, this will be loaded into the memory. Okay, public static and void. This main method does not return any value, and main is the method name, and it is going to take a string array as a argument. Whenever you want to run a program using the command line, and if you want to pass few arguments while running, then you can use it. And then we will say system.out.println hello world. What will mean system.out is actually pointing to your console or output console, and Println is the method which is written, which will take the string as an object and it is displayed to your console. Okay, so this is what it means. Now, can an application have multiple classes having main method? Yes, you can have multiple main methods, but Java always going to looking for the main method and automatically it will invoke say one particular process or the thread. Yes, you can have a multiple main methods. Then what are string buffer and string builder? Now let us talk about the strings. Strings is the one of the key feature of the Java because we always have a manipulation on the everything we do a lot of manipulations on the string. So string is a character sequence of a characters. In Java we will call as a string as an object which contains sequence of characters. And by default strings are final and immutable. That means once you create a string, you cannot change the state of an object. That means that once you cannot change the state of a string. In Java, you can create a strings in two ways. One using the string literal, another one is using the new object. When you create a string using a string literal, the strings will be placed in the string pool. And whenever you create a strings with the new operator, then it will be placed in the heap. Now string buffer. You can modify a state of an object using the string object using string buffer. So whenever you are working with the multi-threaded environment, then you can go with the string buffer because by default string buffer inbuilt the synchronization concept already applied. That means it is going to be thread safe. And whenever you are working with the single threaded environment model, then you go for the string buffer. Sorry, if it is string buffer, then if you are working with a multi-threaded environment, it is always better to use the string buffer to modify a state of an object. But if you are working with the only single threaded environment, then you can go for the string builder. You can change in state of an string object. Now, strings are immutable in Java. Why? The first thing is, as I explained, while you are creating a strings using the string literal, by default those strings will be placed in the string pool. That means whenever you create a same string with the same value, then instead of it is creating a new string, the both strings are actually pointing to the same address where the string value will be there. Hence, strings by default it is immutable so that it will make the consistency across all the objects which are referring to the same string pool. And then what are the arrays in Java? Array is nothing but homogeneous, it is a collection of homogeneous data types. For example, if you want to define a 10 variables of the same data type, then what will happen? You need to say int a1, int a2, like that you need to declare or define 10 variables to hold the 10 values. If there is a requirement like 1,000 values, 1,000 variables you want to define similar, it is going to be tedious process. Hence, arrays what it is going to do is it is going to hold the homogeneous element of as many elements you want it. Okay, so it is going to be a contiguous memory locations. Whenever you define an array, it is going to be a contiguous memory location. The main advantage of the arrays is going to be instead of defining a multiple variables to hold the multiple values, you can define a single variable where you can hold all this group of or collection of the same data type. And second one is you can access the element on random. That means it is based on the index wise you can access. The index range starts from 0 to length total how many values you are going to store minus 1, that is going to be the length. That means 0 to n minus is going to be the index accessing range from 0 to n minus 1. You can access any element by using that index. And also it is you can remove the elements also. That means manipulation of these variables, these values is going to be easy. And next one is uh, the iteration is also using iteration also, it is very easy. That means you can traverse from here to there, or you can do the sorting and you can find the occurrence. So all these are the benefits of the arrays. And disadvantage is whenever you define any array, you need to set the boundary. That means how many elements you want to store for that array. You need to specify this one at the compile time. So this is the one of the disadvantage of arrays, because if you don't know the how many elements it can randomly change on the runtime, then it is very difficult. If you define a max value, then it is unnecessary waste of memory. If you define a very small thing, then it is unnecessary, it might be not accommodate all the values. Hence this is the one of the disadvantage of the arrays. Then, what is the superclass of all the classes in Java? The superclass of all the classes is object. So this is a parent for all the classes in Java. Does Java support multiple inheritance? No, Java does not support multiple inheritance, because there is a ambiguity will happen when it is going to, if a Java class try to extend the two classes, then there will be a ambiguity occurs when the class A and class B class C. Now class B class C having the same method, now it is trying to extend to the these two classes. Let us consider class A is trying to extend B and C, both having the same method. It does not know whether it should get from the class B or class C. Hence, Java does not support multiple inheritance. And then, what are the wrapper classes in Java? Till Java 1.4, we have a primitive data type, but later what the concept is, for the each primitive data type, there is a corresponding data type of its class is available. For example, int is a primary data, but the corresponding integer is there. That means it is going to be convert the primitive data types into corresponding data type of object itself. That means for int, it has the integer. For float, it has a float class. So these wrapper classes are wrapper around the primitive data so that it will be considered as a class itself. That is called as an wrapper classes. Then, what are the collections in Java? Collections are, this is one of the key feature of the collections, because whenever you are working with the Java, it is always we are working with the objects. So collections are going to provide a set of interfaces or the classes and predefined data structures to work with this manipulation over the objects. Either it might be updating or deleting or manipulating or sorting or searching. By default, Java provides all these inbuilt APIs to, to simplify all this process. Then when to use list, set and map. So list basically maintains the insertion order. That means it maintains the order. Either it is an array list or linked list. It basically, the list concept is it maintains the order, and set is it is going to does not allow the duplicates. Either you can go with the hash set or linked hash set or T set. The concept is it does not allow the duplicates, or it can by default it is going to remove the duplicates and you can find only unique elements. And map is whenever you have a requirement like key and value, then map is going to help you there. That means it is like a hash map or hash table. Now what is difference between array list and vector and hash map versus hash table? Array list is basically global array. It is going to it is dynamically changes its size, and It is not thread safe. Whatever the elements you are adding for the array list is not the thread safe. Vector is synchronized representation of the array list. That means it is going to be by default, it is going to be a thread safe. It is also a global array, and only the difference is it is by default thread safe. And hash table maintains the key value, and in the case of hash map, it can allow one null value as a key and as many nulls as a value. And next one is, in the case of hash map, it is not thread safe. In the case of hash table is by default thread safe, and it does not allow any null values. Okay, so these are the basic difference between the hash map and hash table. And what are iterators? When you are working with the collections, in order to traverse through the collection, Java provides the concept of iterators. There are three types of the iterators are available. One is iterator, list iterator, and next one is the enumeration. Apart from that, recently they introduced the for each loop also. By using these four techniques, you can traverse through the collections. Then, what is exception and errors? So an exception is an abnormal condition which stops the normal flow of the execution is known as exception. It is nothing but an abnormal condition which stops the normal execution of the flow is known as the exception. Error is in some event, it is not going to it is not going to be recoverable. That means something happened, it stops. For example, when Java program run, JVM crashes, then it is called as an error. Error is an irrecoverable situation, but exception can be recoverable. Next, what is try, catch, and finally blocks? Java provides the exception handling mechanism so that whenever any exception happen, before it terminate the program, end user should get the user friendly messages so that user can aware of what might be went wrong while he is doing the operations, or when user is using the application. Hence, Java provides three blocks to mainly these are three things. One is try. Try is a, try is a like a monitoring block where you are going to write a set of sequence of sequence of steps or the code which may cause the exception, and then you need to catch them using the catch block. Catchback is nothing but whenever any exception happening in the try, automatically it will be thrown to the catch. That means it will be catched to the catch block. So you need to handle the catch. And finally, it is always going to execute. Whenever you write a few statement in the finally block, this is always is going to be executed. For example, when you are working with the files, you need to specify the closing the streams, or when you are working with a database connection, you need to close the connection. So these things you need to specify in the finally block. The permutation combination is when you write a try, it is always compulsory that whether you need to put catch block or finally. So it is mandatory. And if there is a catch block, then it is you have to define the try block. So this is the another way how to use it. And another one with the exception handling is throws. Throws is when you want to throw some exception where caller method is taking care of the exception handling, then you can use the throws. Throw keyword is used to throw the exception. In the case of user defined exception, you can throw these exceptions using the throw keyword. Next one is, what are the different type of exceptions? So in Java, we will generally call as the two types of the exception. One is the checked exceptions, and another one is the unchecked exceptions. So in Java, the super class of all the exceptions is the throwable. From the throwable, there is a two things. One is exception, another one is the error. Error we cannot handle, so exception. So whatever the exceptions we are, these will categorized into the checked exception. Checked exceptions are, these are mandatory that you have to handle at the compile time. That means developers, it is compulsory enforce the developer to handle checked exception. For example, when you are working with the IO streams, file not found is going to be a checked exception. So you have to handle at the same time while you are doing class dot for name, it will says that class not found. So these are called as a checked exceptions. Compiler is going to enforce you to handle. And unchecked exceptions are, these are due to the programming errors. These may arise at the runtime, for example, arithmetic exception or array index out of bound exception. These we will call as an unchecked exceptions. So these needs to be handled and these will be arise at the runtime and we need to handle using the try catch blocks. And how to create a custom exceptions. So in order to create a custom exceptions, you need to extend the class superclass that is exception. So whatever the class you want to define as a user defined exception, then you need to extend the exception class and then you can create your own custom exception. And then what are the different ways you can handle the exceptions? There are two ways. One is whenever an exception rises, you can simply go ahead and try catch it. That means you will write the first try class with the code which may cause the exception, and then in the catch block you can handle it, you can simply close it. And second one is whenever you thought of or you found an exception, instead of handling it you can throw to the caller method, and the caller method is the responsibility to handle. Even if the caller method is not able to handle, he can rethrow to the their caller method, like that it can. But whenever you don't provide any exception handling, then by default JVM will have a default exception handling mechanism that will be thrown, and the console you can see the what is the exception text set and why it is failed. Next, what is multi-processing and multi-threading in Java? The first thing is multi-processing is nothing but multiple things at a time they can process is nothing but the multi-processing. For example, whenever you are working with the Windows, one time you can check with the music player, another time you can type something, and another way you can do. So that means parallelly you are going to do multiple processes. This is nothing but the process. And process, whenever you say process, a separate memory allocation will be allocated, and that is called as a multi-processing. And next one is multi-threading. Multi-threading is a different way. As I am saying that multi-processing, process is a private memory area. For the each process it is going to allocate a separate memory allocation, but thread is a lightweight component where the multiple threads actually having a single process having the more than one thread, and where they are going to use the common shared resources, and they will execute parallelly. That is called as multi-threading. What is thread in Java? Thread is a lightweight component which has which has its separate path of execution, and it is going to be used the limited and the shared resources. That is called as thread. And what are the states in thread lifecycle? In the case of thread lifecycle, the first one is going to be new. Once it is in the new start, whenever you start the thread, then it is going to be in the runnable status. And once it is runnable means it is going to run. And if there is, if it completes the task, then it will come to the stop status or the end status. If while it is running, if there is any sleep or wait method it is called on the thread, then it will go for the suspend status. And if from the suspend status again, whenever you invoke the notify, again it will come to the runnable status and finally stop. So these are the different stages of the thread states available in the thread lifecycle. Then how many ways you can create a threads in Java? Basically, you can in threads you can create in two ways. One, you by extending the thread class. Another one is by implementing the runnable interface. So these are the two ways you can create a threads. The better way is you always go with the runnable interface, so that whenever any already the class wherever you are trying to implement that threading concept, if it is already extending one class, it is not possible to extend another class. So it is always go with the runnable interface. And then what is the use of sleep, join and yield methods in Java? The first one is sleep. Always suspend your thread for the time, how much time you are going to specify for the thread dot sleep method. Then those many seconds the thread will be sleep and it will not release the logs. The first difference is, in the case of join, join always makes the other threads to stop until the current thread is going to be complete. For example, T1, T2, T3 are the threads. Now when you say T1 dot start and T1 dot join, then you have you written T2 dot start, T3 dot start. Then what happens, until T1 completes, it will not give the control to the T2 T3. That is called that is the purpose of join. Join always makes sure that current thread wherever it is, this thread you invoke the join always completes. And yield is reverse. That means yield always makes sure that our other threads is complete, and then finally it will complete the wherever the specify wherever thread you specify the yield method. That is the difference. And then what is a daemon thread? So daemon thread is a lowest priority thread which always runs in the back end. That means it is a low priority thread. For example, the example of the daemon thread is garbage collector. So garbage collector, it will be running in the background with a low priority. So JVM always give the priority to the user threads. Whenever it feels free, then it is going to run the garbage collector thread. So how you are going to set a daemon thread equal to true, then automatically this will become the daemon thread. What is synchronization in Java? Synchronization is a mechanism or the restriction mechanism in to restrict only one thread at a time can access the shared resources. That means it is a mechanism of restricting the access to the shared resources by implementing the condition that only one thread at a time they can access the shared resources is called synchronization. So in Java, synchronization can be applied at the three levels. One is at the block level, another one is the method level, and the next one is at the class level. So if you define a string synchronization at the block level, then that block level only one thread at a time it can access that block. If you're implementing at the method level, until that method completes execution, then it won't give the control to the other. That means until it won't give the permission to enter the other thread. At the same time, you can implement at the class level also. If you are at the class level, once any thread takes the control over that class and until it completes the execution, it won't allow other threads. So it is simply synchronization keyword you can apply at the block level, also at the method level. And if you want to go with the class level, then you need to define a static with synchronization keyword, then it will be applied at the class level. Next one is, what is volatile and transient keyword in Java? Volatile is whenever you are working with the multi-threaded environment where a common resource is trying to update multiple threads are trying to access a single variable, there will be inconsistency will happen. Hence, the volatile keyword is always make sure that the thread which is accessing this variable always get the latest value from the memory instead of just getting from the cache. So volatile keyword make sure that when multiple threads are trying to access the same variable, it maintains the consistency across all the threads. Next one. What is the serialization and deserialization in Java? Serialization is the process of persisting a state of an object in the form of a byte stream, either in the form of a database or either in form of in the form of a file. So the storing or the persisting of a state of an object to a byte stream in the byte stream is known as a serialization, and the deserialization is the process of getting a object from the persistent, either it is from a file or the database to the object, is known as a deserialization. It is a reverse. So in Java, serialization can be happening in two ways. One is whichever the class you want to go, whichever the class or the object you want to go for the serialization, you need to implement the serializable interface. It is a marker interface. But if you want to have your own customized serialization, then you always go with the externalizable interface, where you need to override two methods, that is the read external, write external. So these are the two methods you need to do. And next, can we serialize the static fields? We cannot serialize the static fields because static fields are related to the class but not to associated with the object. But serialization is the process of storing a state of an object, not the class. Hence, static values will not participate in the serialization process. And also, whenever you work, you know about the serialization, there will be a concept called as serialization version ID. The serialization version ID is going to make sure that we are accessing the correct version of the class. That means whenever you are persisting in state of an object with the particular version, later if somebody is trying to change it, then the version ID is going to be changed. Hence, serialization version ID is always make sure that you are accessing the correct version of the class when it is created, when the object is created. Next, what are the IO streams? So IO streams are basically whenever you're working with the files or the streams, then these are the Java provides a couple of classes to work with this file concept is known as the IO streams. And what is input streams and readers in Java? So whenever you are working with the input streams like a huge type of big files or the images, then always prefer to go with the input streams. And whenever you are working with the character related files, you want to read the character data or writing to the character, then always prefer to go with the reader classes. That means file reader, file writer, these things. And also whenever you are working with the streams, you also it will be also you will come across about the buffer input stream and buffer reader, buffer writer. So buffer input streams or buffer output streams, what it is going to do is, instead of making a round trip to the network, first it is going to copy paste to whatever the data you are going to send or read. It will first place to the buffer classes, and then from buffer to it will be sent to the output or it will be read from the buffer. So buffer is basically optimize the read write performance, read write IO network round trip. It is always help to improve the performance. And then what is the use of console and scanner classes in Java? The console and the scanner classes are used to read input from the user. Because in the case of C, C++, you can have directly you can have a scanf method to read some value. But in Java, you have, if you want to take some input from the user, then you go with the console or the scanner classes. By default, these classes will help you to read the content from the user input, or it take from the control from the user. And what is garbage collector? So garbage collector is one of the strongest feature, or it is going to do the memory management efficiently. By default, Java provides is garbage collector. That means the garbage collector always it is a daemon thread, it is always going to check from the backend, and wherever the Java objects are no longer used by the programs, then the Java collector is going to collect those data and it is going to remove, so that other process or the other process or the other process can use this memory for the execution of the programs. So Java garbage collector is one of the strongest feature to to utilize the memory efficiently by the Java. And what is the purpose of finalize method? See, Java provides a finalize method whenever you are thinking few objects are needs to be cleaned before actually garbage collector go ahead and take that responsibility. Then you can put those set of commands or those code in the finalize method, so that this will be cleaned before actually garbage collector can clean up those objects. Then the final question is going to be, how many ways you can create a object in Java? The first one is class object is equal to new class. For example, employee emp equal to new employee. This is the one way. And second one is class dot for name. That means class dot for name double quotes com dot siva java techie dot core java dot employee. Then as it is a static method, automatically it will be created an object while loading the class. And third one is using the clone. That means you can implement the clonable interface, and then you can override the clone method. Then it is going to be created object. And next one is do by using the serialization. That means deserialization. Once you persistent set up an object, then you can read using the object input stream, and also you can use the object output stream to store in state of an object, and while reading object input stream. So using these four methods, you can create a different ways in Java. Hope these are the most frequently used interview questions for the core Java. And if you have any questions, please comment on my YouTube video, and please subscribe for more updates on the Java technology from my end. Thank you so much for watching. Happy learning.